This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, an online learning community. Do you ever worry if you're doing research and prospect management correctly? At the Institute, we turn researchers into fundraising intelligence assets, leading your development officers to the biggest and best donor prospects, and bringing your organization major gift success.
Constantly investing in the people doing the work. I think a lot of times organizations can take for granted the person that is fulfilling that database role. And it's not until there's a gap where they realize the breakdown. Because when this work is done really well, it's almost invisible. It just flows.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Tricia Marsherall, founder and CEO at Donor Database Experts. Hello, Tricia. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Jen, thanks so much for having me.
So before we jump into talking about donor databases, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share how you landed in fundraising. Everybody wants to know what gets you excited about databases of all things, and then a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So like most people, I feel like I kind of fell into fundraising. I started my career in the nonprofit sector after an internship that I had completed in college, and I absolutely loved the organization. It was a cancer center. I was the only person in the development office. And I had this incredible opportunity where, as with a lot of small shops, you have to wear many hats. And if you are a warm body and raise your hand to do something, the work comes to you. And so I just had this appetite for wanting to learn as much as I could in the industry. And they had just gone through a database conversion there to Razor's Edge. And I realized pretty quickly how important this tool was for tracking the donor engagements and the information that I needed. And from there moved on to another opportunity where I was in advancement services, similar role. And it was really there where I realized that there was this need for people who could understand the intricacies of the database. And I love nerding out about that work, and also then take that information and translate it for senior leadership to be able to make strategic decisions. And so I really love kind of operating in the background and making sure that the information going in is able to support the strategic direction that leaders need to be able to make and can inform the path that they want to take. And so really it was there that my company was born. And today, Donor Database Experts works exclusively with nonprofit organizations, exclusively in donor databases, as our name creatively says. And we work in lots of different tools. So not just Razor's Edge, we do Donor Perfect, Bloomerang, Virtuous, Little Greenlight, lots of tools out there and complementary tools to those donor database software solutions. But we do everything from database audits and assessments to fractional services. So as you know, I'm sure a lot of times organizations have turnover in this database administrator position. And so we can provide those services as well. But we are very fortunate to work with clients across the country. We work with about 100 clients across 30 states. So we're a team of currently 17 full-time, but it had started with just me and a single project. And I'm incredibly grateful to be able to get up and do what I love every day.
It sounds to me like what excites you about donor database work isn't just the whole software, it's how that creates information that feeds into the strategy.
I think one of the things that my team does really well is we have the opportunity to kind of embed ourselves in the organization and work with those entry-level team members that are doing the data entry, as well as senior leadership that is saying, I asked for this, but got this.
It is a great segue because when I think about research and prospect management, I'm not always thinking about fundraising ops, the gift processing and all this stuff. But especially for smaller nonprofits, the fundraising ops, the operations work, and research have a lot of overlap in that data. So across all these years, what have you seen work well in terms of bridging staffing and skill sets as a nonprofit grows into having a major gifts team?
When I think about organizations, a lot of times organizations are really reactive, particularly in the nonprofit sector, right? They're reacting to a need that needs to be fulfilled. They're reacting to leadership has changed and now there's an idea about a campaign. And so it's really reactive, and all of a sudden they're kind of bringing people in, and it's almost a disconnected strategy. The organizations that I see doing really well in this area, they're doing a few things. So they're building repeatable processes and they're documenting it. So they understand that there needs to be consistency. I tell every organization that we work with, I'd much rather take a database that is incorrect, consistently incorrect, than inconsistently incorrect. It is so much easier to deal with information if it's consistent across the board. And I think the other piece that organizations, when doing this work well, is they take a step back and they look at the overall strategy. Where are we headed and how are we defining those terms? When we come into organizations who are building their major gifts shop, who are building their strategy around it, I will ask every single person on that team, what's your definition of a major gift? And every single person typically has a different definition. And you can't possibly build standard processes when everybody has a different definition that they're operating by and how they're applying it. So it's really starting with the basics to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, that we are consistently looking at the database. Their screens are consistently designed in a similar way. We've agreed on what the end result of those reporting structures need to look like. And from there, we can really build out what should the infrastructure of the database and the coding look like. Constantly investing in the people doing the work. I think a lot of times organizations can take for granted the person that is fulfilling that database role. And it's not until there's a gap where they realize the breakdown. Because when this work is done really well, it's almost invisible. It just flows. And when it's taken away, that's when everybody at the organization realizes how much information truly depended on those pieces.
So, what I hear you talking about is the strategy. So, if we're moving into major gifts, there needs to be a strategy around that is clear and defined. Like, what is a major gift? Who should go into a portfolio? Who looks like a good major gift prospect? And then once they're in there, what am I supposed to do with them? Like, how is it supposed to move? All those things. And you're right. So often people aren't clarifying at the outset, and the database person doesn't always take on that role to ask those questions, but I have seen people do it.
Typically, they're not fundraisers, right? And so making sure for the database people, I always coach them to say, ask them what the end result is, because you need to know what they're trying to do with the information so you can ask better clarifying questions about what they're asking from you in terms of criteria or reporting structure, dashboard build outs. You need to know the strategic decisions they'd like to make from it. And then from the gift officer's perspective, sometimes they come and say, well, I just want this list. Well, how that coding is applied in the database, you could potentially be leaving somebody off unintentionally. And so making sure the clarity, I think sometimes this work can be transactional and it needs to be relational. They have to be working together collaboratively so that both can do their best work.
That's wonderful. So, hottest tip you just gave is ask them what they're going to do with it.
Yes.
What are they trying to do? That's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. So once people are in major gifts, and a lot of times I see this in higher education, but really absolutely everywhere. A new person gets hired in development, or it's the VP in higher education, and they're complaining about their database. It's so terrible. They've got to get a new one. I want to know, are the databases out there really that bad? What's going on?
I'm smiling as you're saying this. I know this is an audio only podcast, but I'm smiling because the amount of times that I am asked this question and the amount of times organizations come to me and say, senior leadership is asking me to vet other systems. Our contract is going to be up for renewal. It's jumping significantly in price. I love these conversations because I think a lot of times organizations are looking to try and save just from a contract cost cost basis. And so when you look at that in theory, and at first glance, it looks like you're going to be saving money. In practice, I will say 99% of the time that is not the reality. There is significant cost in conversion. If you're only approaching the database decision around cost, then you're missing the mark, because a tool needs to be supportive of the overall, and I keep saying this, but the overall strategic direction of the organization, because all databases are not the same. For some organizations, they don't need something as robust as some tools out there offer, but getting very clear on what it is that you are doing in a fundraising operation and where you're headed. And so if the intention is to grow significantly, then you should be in a tool that allows you to grow and build with it. The cost of conversion, the cost of training employees, the cost of moving data is significant. And to see that a return or to see a reduction in expense, it's probably going to take a few years. And then at that point, your subscription cost has probably gone up almost in line. The other thing that I often say is a new database can't save you from bad habits. If you've got poor practices in one system, it's just going to convert to the new system, right? And so it's really about digging in to ensure that your team is trained. Are there areas where there's some confusion? Have we actually questioned why we're doing things this way? Is it just this is the way we've always done it? Or are we looking for perhaps a more efficient way to manage a process? And so very rarely is it the database is the issue. There's usually several complicating factors, but especially recently, I'm hearing that the decision process is driven by pricing.
It's so interesting. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about things like you're in a house, you want to move and buy a new house. And for me, the first thing I would do is, oh, I have to clean out all the closets. I have to, declutter everything so
Yes.
that when we move, I can pack everything up carefully and unpack.
Yes.
And many people don't approach moving that way. And
Yes.
many people don't approach cleaning up the database before migrating. So
Yes.
yes, it's so true. It makes a mess. Things get lost. It is very expensive.
Yes, it is. And it's not always the right decision. I've worked with organizations that have converted and actually gone back to the system. And I think if you are truly looking to consider a new system, then being really clear about what you need from that new system, getting clear on exactly what it does. Sometimes when vetting, it's helpful to have people that are really experts in this area, because they can ask questions and then they can dig a layer or two deeper to make sure you're getting the best answer.
It's so true. It is very difficult to know what questions to ask. So I'd really love to ask you about AI, not just because everybody's excited about it, but because it is being used. And I know some folks are concerned about using AI inside the database. Like, whatever you do, don't ask the database, because all the things we just talked about, bad habits, bad data, and all the things. But it's going to happen. And I'm curious what your experience has been so far with that.
Right now, we are at this pivotal moment where there is an incredible opportunity in front of us to be able to deploy this in a really responsible and thoughtful way. So I think the organizations that are doing their due diligence, and what I mean by that is they're bringing in all of the right players in terms of asking their IT team what are some good guidelines that we should operate by, asking their insurance company from a cyber liability standpoint, what do we need to be mindful of, what aren't we thinking of, asking their attorneys, right? So to me, doing this responsibly and sustainably first and foremost, I think ethically that is the way to move about it. So taking that time to pause, bring the right stakeholders together, and then figuring out, again, what's the strategy and what are we trying to accomplish? Because AI for AI's sake doesn't make any sense to me. It just is more information. It's not necessarily strategically deployed. There are absolutely incredible things that can be done from a reporting standpoint, from analytics, but your data also has to be clean in order for the AI to work properly. We have lots of clients who are automating some donor journeys. So a donor gives for the first time and they can can specify if the donor has designated their gift to a specific fund or specific scholarship. The content can be targeted and edited for that specific person. And I love that. I think that there are ways to enhance the relationship building, but right now it cannot replace that human interaction either. So having a strategy where you're enhancing that kind of engagement and building from that is key. So first and foremost, it's taking a step back and understanding how are we as an organization going to responsibly and ethically deploy this? What are the guidelines through which we want to operate on? And then making sure we're educating everybody that this is what we're agreeing on and continuing the conversation. It's changing so quickly. This isn't a one and done conversation. From there, okay, what are the first things that we want to do? And it's let's gain some momentum, right? Let's start here, see how that's functioning, and then layer on and add to it. It is evolving at a really rapid pace. The best organizations are doing this in a very methodical way.
I love that answer. There are just so many ways in which AI can touch and change the work that we do, and we can't do it all at once.
Right,
People don't change that fast.
right, right. Yep. Yeah.
So just because they're in a race and the companies are all in a race to outdo each other with products and features, it doesn't mean that we have to be in a race or the
Exactly.
same race.
The best organizations are doing it really responsibly. I was actually just listening to Good to Great. I had read it a long time ago and I have just been recently re-listening to that. And in it, they talk a lot about the dot-com era and they talk about Walgreens and how they were trading on the stock market and another player came in and the stock market really went crazy for them and Walgreens dipped. But what Walgreens was doing was taking that year to figure out, okay, how does this align with our strategy and how we're going to connect with customers? And they just sustainably, responsibly deployed it and were incredibly insightful and thoughtful about how they implemented it. And they just became who they are today. But it's interesting because the parallels between AI and the dot-com era currently are really interesting. This isn't something that we've not seen it for the first time, right? Like our generation lived through the dot-com era. So what lessons can be learned from that and applied to the AI era now?
Oh, that's great. I hadn't thought about it that way. In research, I think about it like Google. Google came out, the internet exploded, and that affected how people viewed the work that we do. And it changed our work and grew our profession. But here we are again with the same kind of disruptive technology.
Absolutely.
So before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any preventative care type of recommendations for nonprofits about keeping their fundraising operations humming.
I think a lot of organizations, at least when they contact us, they kind of find us when there's a problem, when there's some sort of crisis that's happening, when somebody's frustrated, when there's been a unexpected transition. And I think the best thing that I can say is just from a preventative perspective is just make sure that you're taking those steps to kind of check in and ensure that are there data hygiene queries that need to be run monthly that are the first thing to fall off the plate because we're expecting too much from one person. We've got the expectations that we have to do more with less. Understanding how we can responsibly look ahead from a strategic standpoint and just take those consistent steps. Not waiting for pain to force a process is key, and just making sure that you're documenting those critical workflows is also key, because if there is an unexpected transition, then you need to make sure that you can invest in standing up the next best process or solution, whatever that is. And I think having some of those pieces in place, you're investing before you're in a crisis, before you're desperate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
That was Tricia Marsherall, founder and CEO at Donor Database Experts. If you liked what you heard from Tricia today, be sure and check out her company's Knowledge Hub at donordatabaseexperts.com/knowledge-hub, where you'll find free resources like their recent webinar that covered preparing for Razor's Edge 2027 Database View Sunset, and a guide on how to improve your donor database for fundraising success. If you're looking for a resource to keep current on all things database, especially as organizations think about deploying AI in the database, sign up for Donor Database Experts newsletter. Tricia and her team have your back.
Hey
Hey there! Do you manage a prospect research team, or were you newly hired as a prospect researcher? Then you'll be delighted to hear about the Institute's Career Agent Track. In this bundle of 4 courses, participants learn how to build great profiles, calculate capacity ratings, the basics of prospect identification and prospect management, ethics, and the fundamentals of analytics every team member needs to be skilled in. If you need to build the research skills of a fundraising intelligence asset like this, sign up today at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org/career agent.